Inside America's Boardrooms, the informational show for board members and corporate secretaries. Brought to you with Knowledge Partners, Diligent, PwC, Center for Audit Quality, Spencer Stewart, the Conference Board, and Corporate Board Member, along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, Donnelly Financial Solutions, and the Society for Corporate Governance.
Hi, welcome to today's episode of Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm Doug Chia, the Executive Director of the Governance Center at the Conference Board, and your host for today, standing in for the show's regular host, TK Kerstetter. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's show, which is being filmed at the Conference Board in New York City. And today we're going to be talking about a very important issue, and that's the topic, the issue of the continuing evolution of engagement by directors with institutional investors. Joining me is Eileen Cohen, who until recently retiring was Managing Director at JP Morgan Asset Management. At JP Morgan Asset Management, Eileen was chair of the North America Governance Committee, and she led JP Morgan Asset Management's senior corporate engagement activities. Currently, Eileen is a senior fellow for the Conference Board Governance Center. So, Eileen, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Doug.
Let's talk a little bit about the portfolio that you oversaw at JP Morgan Asset Management. What were the types of investments that were offered by the firm?
So the firm offers equity investing across a broad array of different strategies, including large cap, small cap, growth, value, income, in addition to quantitative and factor-based model work. And this platform in the United States was just shy of $300 billion in assets, but globally it was twice that. And in the US, we held almost every security in the US market, which was about 3,000 companies out of about 9,000 globally.
Got it. And what kind of staff did you have when you were kind of leaving?
So interestingly enough, we're every senior professional who does all the governance engagement work around the firm, around the world, is also a member of the investment teams. So we all did had other responsibilities in addition to proxy review and governance and engagement. Some of the professionals are directly involved in overseeing the risk management functions of the portfolios, others involved in working on product development and client development in addition to and working with our portfolio managers. So in the US, we had a team of 3 senior professionals who were very much involved with the investors and then did all the engagement work and the voting work. And around the world, maybe a total of 10 professionals. Remember that also the back office handles quite a bit of all of the infrastructure of the mechanics of voting and getting our votes in the system correctly. And those teams have a number of individuals who also do other things as well. So we were pretty lean and mean, I would say.
Yeah, definitely lean. I mean, for the amount of coverage you had, and that's globally. So, in terms of your staff and particularly the back office, when you talk about the mechanics of voting and all of that stuff, whenever you get into that, there's the topic of proxy advisory firms. The SEC is going to hold a roundtable talking about this. Proxy advisory firms is a very hot topic for both the Hill and the SEC. And so, of course, we've all heard the criticism of proxy advisory firms where people claim that large portfolio managers are either blindly following the voting recommendations of ISS and Glass Lewis, or they're completely outsourcing the voting decisions and voting mechanics to these proxy advisory firms. You've been inside this industry. What's the reality here?
So it's hard to know exactly how other investment firms cast their votes, but the observation that I've made over the years is that the trillions of dollars invested by the large firms are voted independently based on their own written policies and procedures, which are, as you know, published on their website so that individuals can read them. However, and so I think all those votes are basically done very independently based on individual firms' approaches to governance issues. However, I have made an observation, my own observation, that in contested situations, M&A or proxy fights, that I do sense that the proxy advisory firms do have an influence over the final decisions. And I'm not sure why that would be so. I can speculate, but my sense is that they do have an undue influence in those situations. The other thing we have to recognize is that in the investment management industry, about $1 trillion of assets is managed by quantitative firms, factor-based modeling firms, and hedge funds. Most of them, not all, but most of them outsource their vote because they are not established internally with a staff who will do engagements or really understand the fundamentals of each company. So that's a large amount of assets. So one could speculate that those votes correlate highly with the proxy advisory firms.
Well, okay, that's that's very interesting and kind of one of those nuggets that not everybody hears every day. So another criticism of, or kind of perception of the large asset managers is that the proxy voting side and the investment decision side they perform in different silos and they don't really talk to each other or coordinate, so you sometimes get strange decisions where a portfolio manager is recommending a buy on something and the voting side is saying, let's, vote against directors or something like that. Obviously that's extreme. But I know that JP Morgan Asset Management, you had a very kind of integrated way of working. And so maybe you could just describe that a little bit.
So as I mentioned, all of the professionals around the world who engage with companies and doing governance engagement and proxy voting and sustainability reviews are part of the investment team. So we all work directly for the global chief investment officer. And we have found that the decisions around governance issues has to, from our perspective, include the investment portfolio manager view on the particular issues. It's my observation that over the years, many firms have begun to incorporate the views of their portfolio managers in engagement meetings and probably in proxy voting themselves. They may be still in separate silos of the organization, but I think that there is more incorporation of having the investor views incorporated. That's not to say that everyone has the same structure. In some firms, still the portfolio manager casts the vote, and in other firms, the governance professional casts the vote. But I think we're getting closer in including the right participants into the dialogue, which also includes the corporate side. We have been seeing more and more IR participating with the corporate secretary or general counsel in governance-related dialogue. And I see more and more of that, and I think that is a good trend, and will incorporate the investors on the buy side to participate more as well if the IR person's involved.
Absolutely. It's almost like the practices are converging and the parties are cooperating with one another. So I think that's a good thing. So the IR folks don't come back and say the investors don't care about governance. We've talked to them and it never comes up. So let's move to engagement between institutional investors and the directors. I know from my own experiences in the room with you that the people you have in the room is a broad mix, and you are not afraid to pose challenging issues to the directors about the companies on the boards they sit, and ask pretty tough questions and expect some, very candid answers from them. So for the directors who are being told these days that it's now part of your job to go in and speak face to face with your largest investors, what's your advice for directors who are tasked with doing that?
Well, we have always considered it a great opportunity when a director makes him or herself available for discussion. And by that I mean it's a great opportunity for us as investors to get a good sense from the director's perspective about the current strategy of the firm as being discussed by the CEO, CFO on calls with our buy-side investors. So we would like the director to be prepared to discuss strategy, board dynamics, which includes refreshment policy, self-assessments, how the board is working to help execute against the strategy. Importantly, also, the board should be very conversant on who they are speaking with. Each of these investment firms that is a shareholder of their company has a different approach to investing, has a different client base possibly. And so I think it's important for the board to be conversant on who their audience is, how long they've owned the stock, what type of investing they do, and they need to be prepped a little bit more about that. They also, more and more today, need to be conversant on topics that a decade ago wasn't even in the lexicon of our discussions, including sustainability and what the company is doing in that regard, and corporate culture.
Well, Eileen, thanks a lot. This has been very enlightening, I think, for our viewers. And thanks again for joining us today. And that will conclude this episode of Inside America's Boardrooms. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll be back next week here at the conference board, and TK will probably be back at that point. And you'll have another episode to help you be a better board member or board committee member. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Join us again next week for Inside America's Boardrooms, brought to you with Knowledge Partners, Diligent, PwC, Center for Audit Quality, Spencer Stewart, the Conference Board, and Corporate Board Member, along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, Donnelly Financial Solutions, and the Society for Corporate Governance.